Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm bringing you guys a brand new track review segment video where I get to talk about some new tracks that have been recently released and share with you guys my general thoughts on them. I'm not going to waste too much of your time here today in the intro. I say we just get started with the first track I want to talk about here today, which is going to be this new Injury Reserve track, Jawbreaker. I've been following Injury Reserve for a bit now, and I'm pretty excited to hear how the album they're going to be dropping later this year ends up sounding. But this new single for them right here is one that I'm a little bit let down by. I still like this song overall when all is said and done, but I do think it's a slightly weaker track than what I was hoping for from these guys. There are several aspects of this track I'm not exactly the biggest fan of. For example, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of the spoken word part here in this track. I just kind of feel like it's there, but it doesn't really do a whole lot for the track overall. It just kind of feels like a waste of my time whenever I finish listening to that segment of the song. And the chorus here on the track provided by Proteins just isn't a super interesting chorus in my opinion. Once again, it's just kind of there, but it doesn't do a whole ton for me. Despite some of my complaints with this track, I do feel like the rapped verses on the song are pretty great overall, not just from Injury Reserve, but also from the featured Rico Nasty who pops up on this track. Does a great job here, has great chemistry with Injury Reserve as well. Overall, the rap verses on this thing are a highlight as well. I also think the beat is a pretty solid one as well. Not one that blew me away or anything, but not one that's bad either. Overall, this is a good song, but it's not one that, wowed me or anything. Maybe I was just expecting a bit more from a song that I'm guessing is going to be on this new upcoming album from them. Maybe this won't be, but I'm expecting that it is, given that they have an album coming around the corner and this is what they dropped. It just kind of makes sense for this to be on the album, I guess, but I don't know. Maybe it won't be. Decent track overall. Check it out if you're a fan, if you like hip-hop, but it's not one for me that, wowed me a whole ton. I don't know. Maybe it'll grow on me with time. Next up, we're going to be talking about this new J. Cole track, Middle Child. When it comes to J. Cole, I've never been super crazy about the guy's music. I don't hate his music, really, but I've never been super interested in either. I've just been really middle of the road with him and pretty much the majority of the music that he's ever released, at least when it comes to the music from him that I've heard. Didn't really bother checking out his album that came out last year for that reason. That's why I didn't review it. But considering that this is just one song, I decided to check it out. Why not? And overall, I'm walking away from this track feeling the same way I do when it comes to most things related to J. Cole that I've heard so far, just really uninterested. J. Cole's rapping on the track is pretty fine overall, and the beat that's paired up with it isn't particularly bad either. It's just there's very little here in this song that I find super interesting. The lyrics on the track are just pretty bland overall. The beat, while not terrible, isn't super great either. The way the whole track just progresses isn't particularly interesting as well. The hook on this track isn't particularly great either. I'm not a big fan of the auto-tune or manipulations that are put on J. Cole's vocals here. They just sound kind of out of place and odd. So yeah, I don't really have a whole ton to say about this track overall. I have a feeling that J. Cole fans are going to love this, or at least like it, but people who aren't really big on J. Cole necessarily, like I am, probably won't get a whole ton from this one. So yeah, liked the rapping here on this track, but outside of that, there wasn't a whole ton that I really found myself caring for. Next up, we're going to be talking about a couple new tracks from Charlemagne's Menagerie. The first of these is the instrumental track Investigating, which is an entirely new song. This track here is overall one that I find myself really enjoying. It reminds me a lot of the instrumentals on No Signal, the debut album from this project that came out last year. And I liked a lot of those instrumentals for the same reasons that I like this new song here. It has a very spacey, almost, alien, sort of paranoid, but at the same time kind of a warm feel to it that I just find really intriguing. This cut sounds very futuristic, but at the same time it's very moody and down-to-earth as well. Overall, just a really well put together instrumental cut, and it's one that I think if you like that debut album from last year, you'll find yourself enjoying as well. Or if you haven't heard that debut album from last year, give this track a listen. If you enjoy this, check out that album as well. The second of the two tracks we're talking about from Charlemagne's Menagerie is this new vocal remix of the track Fields. The original version of this track appeared back on an older EP, and this newer version here features of vocals, as you might be able to tell by the title of the track. The instrumental to this track is also one that I like for the same reasons that I did like the last track I was just talking about, as well as that debut album from last year, and even the original version of this track as well. It has that very spacey alien feel that at the same time feels very warm and down to earth as well. Easily my favorite part of this track is also the instrumental. When it comes to the vocals here on this track, I think they could be a little bit hit or miss at times, especially towards the beginning. They do sound a bit rough, even more so than I tend to like when it comes from my more rough around the edges type of music. However, as the track progresses, the vocals do become better overall. They start to sound a bit more natural and in place with the instrumental and the overall tone of the track. I feel like especially around the chorus of this track is when the vocals and the instrumentation here on the track are combined at their best pretty much, where they just complement each other the best overall. I also like the lyrics here on this track and how they match the very spacey and futuristic feel of the song rather nicely. Overall, this is a pretty solid cut at the end of the day. I do feel like the vocals are a bit hit or miss at times. However, I would say that they are more hit than they are miss. And if you are a fan of that debut album from last year or the previous track I was just talking about, you'll get some enjoyment out of this one as well. And overall, these couple of tracks that we got from Charlemagne's Menagerie are pretty solid songs overall. They definitely feel like they could be on that last album from last year to some extent, almost like they were maybe just left off the album or something like that, even though that wasn't the case with them. But yeah, if you like that debut album, you'll like these two tracks. Or maybe if you're being exposed to this music project through these two tracks, you'll like that debut album. So yeah, check all of those out. Alright, moving on, the next couple of tracks that we have to talk about are actually cover tracks, not by the same artist, but the two of them are still cover tracks regardless. The first of them that we're going to be talking about is a new track from Beck. It's a cover of the Color Box song Tarantula. I wasn't familiar with the original track or the artist it was by, but I did check it out just to have a better understanding of this cover and where it was coming from overall. And at the end of the day, I think that this is a pretty average cut, really. The cover version, that is, not necessarily the original. I think the original is a pretty interesting song overall. I'm not sure if it's something I would come back to over and over again, but I could definitely see a lot of positives in the original track. But this cover version here from Beck, I just feel like is slightly less interesting, really. I do like on this track how there's a nice build up to the chorus here, and then when that chorus finally arrives, there's a nice release and energy to go along with it. However, I feel like this is because the rest of the track outside of the hook is really just not all that interesting, more so than because it really, builds up to that chorus in a proper and interesting way. I just feel like the majority of this cover isn't super interesting, really. It's not terrible, it's not painful to listen to or anything like that, but at the same time, it's not a track that I really have any desire to return to all that much. Yeah, there's definitely redeemable qualities here in this thing, there's things to like here, but at the same time, there's also things I don't really care for all that much, and I just feel really mixed on this thing at the end of the day. Not a super interesting song, but if you are a Beck fan, or if you're a big fan maybe of the original track, maybe this is worth giving a listen to just see a different version of it. So yeah, this track didn't do a whole ton for me, but maybe it will for you. The next and final track that we have to talk about here today is this cover of Simon and Garfunkel's Hazy Shade of Winter by Gerard Way featuring Ray Toro. Now, Gerard Way, best known as the former lead vocalist of My Chemical Romance when they were a thing, and Ray Toro was also the guitarist for My Chemical Romance as well, so this track is kind of a reunion of sorts, even if it isn't the whole group. Still pretty cool to see as a pretty big My Chemical Romance fan myself, though like I said, this track is a cover song, and it's a pretty interesting one at the end of the day, and I mean that in a good way. I wasn't super familiar with the original version of this cut, though I don't think it's a bad song by any means. I think it's pretty solid overall, in fact. But this new version here by Gerard Way definitely takes the original, and he definitely puts his own spin on the track, really. This definitely does sound what you would expect, really, from Gerard Way doing a track that sounds like the original version of this track sounded like. I like the slower start up to this track that eventually builds up to a nice release of energy later on, and I like how Gerard Way is able to take this older track and essentially twist it into this more modern sounding, almost pop punkish version of the original song that still definitely is a cover of the original, but at the same time is very much its own thing, and he definitely makes it his own song. This definitely sounds like a Gerard Way track. And that's really all I could ask for on a cover song, really. If you want to know why I was so harsh on that Weezer Teal album that recently came out, I mean, looking at a track like this is why, really, because this is what I expect to see when it comes to cover songs. Artists taking stuff that maybe was different in its original format and twisting it into something that sounds a lot more interesting. This is it, pretty much. Not any of that stuff from the Teal album. Alright, I'm done talking about the Teal album now, I promise. But yeah, this is a really solid cover track overall. It's definitely one that I would recommend to fans of Gerard Way, fans of My Chemical Romance maybe, who haven't been following his solo career in music as closely as others have. Because like I said, while this isn't a My Chemical Romance reunion by any means, it does have Ray Toro featured on the track, and they do have some nice chemistry here on this song. And it doesn't sound necessarily like a My Chemical Romance song, but it has traces of sounding like one, as you would expect, given that two members of My Chemical Romance are behind this track. But yeah, it's a really solid cover song overall. Not one that I would say is one of the best of all time or anything, but still a really solid cover song overall. I do believe I saw that this song was created for a upcoming Netflix adaptation of one of Gerard Way's comic series that he's worked on. Not sure how, in what context it's going to be used in that show, but yeah, I guess I'm kind of excited for that as well. And I'll definitely try to check out that series, given that I like Gerard Way and his music stuff. I haven't really dived as much into his other works, but I'm pretty interested in checking that out whenever that does get released. So yeah, definitely give this track a listen if you're a fan of My Chemical Romance, Gerard Way, any of that style of music, really, you'll like this track pretty much. And with that said, that concludes this new track review segment of mine, where we got to cover some new releases. Overall, this was just my own personal opinion when it comes to all of these tracks. If you happen to disagree, if you happen to feel differently regarding any of these songs, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave your opinions on any or all of these songs in the comment section down below. While you're down there, make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you for watching, and stay golden.